But look at this. I got the LSU jersey on. Not necessarily because I'm an LSU fan. If you look at the guy on the back, I'll turn around for you real quick. Can you see that with the microphone? It says Joe Burrow with the Louisiana spelling. Back in the glory days of LSU football. Do you remember that? Do you remember 2 years ago where LSU became one of the most dominant teams that we've seen in all of college football? You obviously had Joe Burrow, quarterback. On the wings, you had guys like Jamar Chase. Look over there. There's Justin Jefferson. And in the slot, you got Terrace Marshall. And in running back behind me, there's Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And then you look at the defense. You got guys like Patrick Queen. Look, there's Caleb Chase on. You got Derek Stingley out wide. You got guys like Grant Delpit. Man, LSU football is looking absolutely amazing. Remember that time when they won the national championship against Clemson? Remember the amount of recruiting fire that it looked like LSU was gaining? Look at the amount of talent that LSU was going to continue to bring in, and they were going to continue to be one of the best teams in all of college football for the next couple of years. If I fast forward you 2 years now and told you that last season, where did they go last season? 5-5, and I would have told you that they started the season 0-1 with a loss to UCLA, you probably would have said I'm crazy, because you probably would have said Coach O is one of the best coaches in all of college football right now. You're seriously telling me that he went after the season, he won the national championship, he goes 5-5 and opens up this season with a loss to UCLA? Well, that's what's happened. That's what's happened with LSU football. And I really, really, really don't know. It's honestly such a great mystery to me on why LSU is struggling so much, because on paper, I've said this, I've preached this for so long. On paper, LSU is still one of the best teams in all of college football. I will stand by that statement. The amount of talent that they got on that team on both sides of the ball, I got no problem in coming out here and saying that LSU still on paper, if you take talent for talent, you go up player for player, match them up against any other team, LSU's looking like one of the best teams in all of college football. There's no question about it. No one can prove me otherwise that LSU does not have the talent to be an elite football program this year. So why are they not an elite football program? We'll take a look at some of the stats from yesterday. LSU obviously traveled to UCLA. Now, I don't want to go too hard on LSU here, because if we take into account what they had to go through the hurricane and everything, obviously the hurricane hit Louisiana pretty hard, and they had to travel all the way out to Houston to go practice there. So obviously the game week experience was kind of different. You had to move to a new place, and then you got to travel all the way across the coast. Now, I can't really use the traveling to an away game as an excuse, because if you're a good football team, you got to win on the road anyways. But moving with the hurricane and everything like that, I'm not saying that was an easy thing at all. So obviously that could have played some effect into what LSU was doing. But LSU offensively, in my opinion, there wasn't really any problem in the passing game, because Max Johnson went out there, threw 26 for 46, threw 330 yards, 3 touchdowns for 1 interception. And then Kayshon Boutte is obviously one of the best players in all of college football at the wide receiver position. 9 receptions, 148 yards for 3 touchdowns with a long of 45 in that game. He averaged 16.4 yards per catch yesterday. Kayshon Boutte is still going to be one of the best wide receivers in all of college football. I think Max Johnson had a decent game yesterday. Other than that one pick, he was really, really good in that game. So I think passing-wise, LSU was fine yesterday, and this offense will continue to be fine as they go into, I'm pretty sure they play McNeese State next week. I could be wrong. Yes, they do. Look at me. Look at me remembering my schedule and everything like that. But you look at this LSU rushing game, and that's where I think you would go back 2 years ago and you look at what you had on the offensive line, and you look at who you had in the backfield for LSU, obviously Clyde Edwards-Helaire. LSU only rushed for 49 yards last night, where you look at what UCLA was able to rush for, 210. That's a bit of a difference. Now, LSU did outpass UCLA, but that was only 330 to 260. When you're talking about 210 to 49, there's a bit of a difference gap there, a huge difference gap there. So I think LSU's rushing game is really going to be a main point of focus this season for something that's got to get better if you want to go in and win these big-time SEC games. Like, let's not forget, this LSU team still has to go up and play teams like Florida this year. They still got to go up against Alabama, got to go up against Auburn. They got to go up against all these guys. And if you can't run the football, it's going to be a tough year for LSU. So I think that's one thing, a point of focus that definitely has to get better. Again, I've said it. LSU, passing-wise, I still think that they're going to be a good team in the SEC passing-wise. I think Max Johnson still is going to be one of the better quarterbacks in all the SEC. I stand by that statement. He showed it yesterday. He played a good game on the road, and obviously Kayshon was a huge target for him. But other than that, Trey Palmer had 7 receptions for 47 yards. Jeray Jenkins had 3 for 46. Moore had 3 for 32. And then other than that, kind of dipped off there. But those were your main receivers last night. what the real struggle for LSU is defense. That was the problem last year. On paper, I still stand by this. On paper, LSU has one of the best defenses in all of college football. Take that of what you will. But LSU still has one of the best defenses in all of college football on paper. I will say it one more time. LSU has one of the best defenses in all of college football on paper. But if we look at the stats from last night, especially defensive line, because I raved about this defensive line in the preseason, they got rushed on, and they got rushed on hard for 210 yards. You look at some of the individual box scores for UCLA rushing. Zach Charbonnet looks like he's one of the Heisman favorites right now, if I'm being dead serious. He had an amazing game against Hawaii last week, and last night he rushed for 11 carries for 117 yards, 10.6 average, and 1 touchdown. Zach Charbonnet has gone back to UCLA. He initially transferred from Michigan. He went back home to UCLA. He has done absolutely amazing so far for UCLA. Bottom line, Zach Charbonnet has gone into UCLA and done absolutely amazing. But if we're talking about LSU's D-line, the one that I rave so much about, they gave up 210 yards. It's as simple as that. That was a killer for this game. When UCLA was just able to rush the football, what can LSU really do? When you establish a rushing game, what can you really do defensively? Now, the secondary, I honestly didn't think did terrible for LSU yesterday, but for the talent that they have on there, still they gave up 260 yards, and they gave up 16.3 yards per pass last night. They did get a pick last night, so I think the secondary was decent. It wasn't a main point of concern that I'm like, this LSU secondary with all the talent that they got, and they did terrible last night, that's the reason why they lost. I don't think the secondary was the reason that LSU lost here. It was decent, but I still think there's some points where they could have tightened up a bit more. Third down efficiency, LSU converted 6 of 15 offensively, and defensively they let up 3 for 13. That is obviously going to be a huge, huge, huge point of concern. When you're giving up 7 first third downs in a game for 13 and the other team's over 500 for first downs, is a huge point of concern, especially when you're only able to go 6 for 15. That puts you at just over 333, because 5 for 15 is going to put you at 333. Average for third down efficiency. What's the next steps for LSU? What's the next steps for Coach O? Is Coach O on the decline? Is Coach O on the hot seat now? Is LSU really deteriorating before our very eyes? I don't know. We can't judge too much on the first game. I know that there's a lot to talk about with LSU. It's the first game. I got to calm down because, yes, I came out here pretty hard against LSU, which LSU is a team that I honestly love cheering for. I wouldn't have an LSU jersey if I did not enjoy watching LSU football. But I don't want to overreact too much for the first game, but defensively is where the problems got to come from. I mean, Coach Jones, you obviously had Bo Pelini last year. That did not work out at all. You could bring in Coach Jones this year. First game was rough. Something's got to change defensively. You got to switch up new schemes. You just got to be able to slow the run down first and foremost. I think you got to be able to slow the run down in this secondary. I think you just got to produce more turnovers. For the talent that you have on this defense, if you go back to that 2019 season, this LSU team was forcing turnovers left, right, and center. It was as simple as that. They were turning the ball over all the time. You forced one turnover in this game, but I feel like just defensively, the amount of firepower that you had in that 2019 season and the amount of turnover so that they were able to produce last season, it's just kind of felt lost. It's kind of felt lost, and just the same firepower and the same energy and everything that they brought to that defense in 2019 just kind of feels different. Just kind of feels different for LSU. So what's next for LSU? If we take a look at their schedule, obviously I said it before, they play McNeese State next week, then they go out and play Central Michigan, and then you travel to Mississippi State, and then your first big test other than UCLA, I say, when Auburn comes into town on October 2nd. Obviously, Auburn beat you pretty good last year, so that's a game that you got to get prepared for. I don't know how Auburn's offense is going to look because obviously we saw them play very well against Akron yesterday, but we got to see Auburn go to Penn State to really get a feel for what this Auburn offense is going to be all about. But LSU right now, they got to get on track defensively. So in that McNeese State game, in that Central Michigan game, even in that Mississippi State game, you got to limit the points that you're allowing to score, because when you go up against guys like Auburn, when you go up against Florida, when you go up against Ole Miss, when you go up against Alabama, when you go up against Texas A&M, they are going to be able to score the football. And if you cannot stop them from doing that, you're not going to win any games this season. It's plain and simple as that.